Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on sexual assault kits and beyond. We have got a great training lined up for you today, and we have a tremendous, well over 800 agencies with us today. Thousands of you have signed up for this class, and so we're super excited to have you here. We're thankful you took the time out, and we're also thankful for IAPE being able to be a resource for us to provide this training for us, for you. We've had a number of these webinars. I believe this is our 6th webinar now, and we just keep getting more and more feedback from everyone, and we appreciate that. And so we're going to continue to do these as long as there's a need out there to do them. And just along with that, I would like to introduce IAPE to you. Again, like I said, they help make these classes happen. I know many of you have attended an IAPE class at some point, but many of you have not. And so I'm going to briefly introduce them to you. They are the International Association of Property Evidence, and they've actually been teaching property and evidence classes since 1993. In that time, they've instructed well over 25,000 property professionals across all 50 states and the provinces of Canada. IAPE's goal is really to ensure that anyone who works in the property room, whether it's a supervisor or someone that manages the property room, understands the complexities, nuances, and liabilities associated with that property room and really around the public that you serve in maintaining that evidence that's in your custody. And so if you have never attended a class, or maybe you've attended one in the past, or you want to know information about them, you can go to IAPE.org and be able to get more information. You can also certainly look them up on Facebook or LinkedIn, and I would highly encourage that you take a look at what they do. They also offer a certification programs and accreditation programs for departments. So something to consider if you're in need of that or needing something like that. They are an excellent resource for training and so much more. And they offer actually a 2-day in-person class. And now that things are beginning to open up, they're being able to do more of these again. But for those of you that maybe want to be able to do it remotely, they also offer online classes. So again, you can get that information on their website. And a little bit about us, we are a platform solutions company, and we've actually just released our evidence management platform. Now, we've had an evidence software platform for a long time regarding your physical evidence, but this new platform is for your physical evidence, your digital evidence, and your found property, because we understand that being able to get found property back to owners or knowing who those owners are is extremely challenging. And so this new platform allows you to be able to do all of that with greater efficiency, confidence, and integrity. And because we know where the state of the world is today with budgets and futures and planning and the need for good software, excuse me, we are now actually offering this solution at a monthly subscription price. So that barrier to entry to be able to adopt software or a solution for your agency is now much easier to do. And we also, with this platform, if you're using an RMS system or you have an RMS system in place, we will provide full integration into that RMS included with this platform and much more. So just if you are interested, or if this is something that fascinates you and you would like more information, we are actually going to be doing a webinar next week on March 4th at 10 a.m. We're going to be able to showcase this to you. We're going to be able to show you what it does and how it can really impact all of these things you see on the screen here, even sexual assault kits, around notifications and timelines and everything else that's associated with sexual assault kits, how this solution can significantly and positively impact your agency. Okay. A little more house cleaning for everyone is you are muted. So many people here, there'd be no way to be able to do this with everyone talking, but we know you're going to have questions, and I know the training today is going to be really geared around your interaction. So through your GoToWebinar interface, there is a questions tab or option there that you can click on that will open up and allows you to submit questions. Please submit these questions at any time. We're going to do our best to answer these at the end of the webinar, but we realize there may be so many, we're not going to get to all of them, but we're going to do our best. We may run a little long, so you're welcome to stay as we address those questions. But at the same time, if we can't get to them, we'll do our best after the webinar to reply by email and get those questions answered. Okay, a little bit about who's here with us today. We've got a number of people from the IAPE joining us to help facilitate the class, and primarily We have Rochelle Ecruz with us today, and I'd like to introduce Rochelle to you. Rochelle, first off, thank you for taking the time to be here, and I know your very hectic schedule, so we appreciate it. But Rochelle is actually the founder and CEO of the Center of Forensic Nursing Excellence International and a clinical director of Nevada Health Right, a nonprofit healthcare practice. She serves as a clinical forensic resource and consultant to organizations and government entities and contributes as subject matter expert on numerous committees and advisory boards. She is fully committed to advancing evidence-based and research-informed practices among multidisciplinary teams involved in the complex responses to violence. Her ability to engage stakeholders, and even everyone here today, has really directly affected multidisciplinary practices within evidence management processes and policy on local, national, and international levels. So she has had a great impact, positive impact on our industry, and we're thankful that she's here today to share her expertise and skill with us. So Rochelle, if you're out there, I'd love to pass this over to you if you're ready on your end.
Sounds good, Craig. I am up and going. Tell me when you can see my screen.
Okay. I'm going to send it over right now. You should get a prompt in your end and you should be able to share your screen.
I'm sharing. Let me know if you can see.
And if someone else out there can let me know if you can see it, that would be great. I get a little bit of delay on my end, so anybody on the team here, just let me know if it's showing okay.
Craig, it's showing up.
There we go.
Okay, awesome.
All right, so before I get started, I need to send out a special thank you. Number one, to Dr. Lauren Traveler. She was my partner in crime throughout this entire project, and it would not have ever been completed if it wasn't for her. And I'll talk a little bit more about the project when we get started on the presentation. I also want to thank everyone who submitted kits for the analysis project and the experts who were prompted me to think literally outside of the box or outside of the envelope and look at the implications that our sexual assault kits have for different practices and for evidence management. Part of this project was completed when I was at the UNLV School of Nursing, and so I wanted to mention them and their IRB, and then of course with IAPN allowing me to bring this information to all of you. It looks like right now we're pushing just under 800 people with us today, so this is very exciting. So thank you for being here. I want to let you know that I know I'm not going to be able to answer all of your questions. And I know you're going to have system questions. I know you're going to have questions that are related specifically to your organization. So what we are providing right now is, and I know everyone hates to hear this, but it is a 30,000 foot view, but with some very on the ground, real life examples to apply it. And as Craig mentioned, we know we're going to have a lot of questions we may not get to, and we're going to do our best to answer those after the fact, and you'll also have the ability to reach out to me directly. The other piece I want to mention is we all do the best we can do with what we know. And when we attend trainings and we learn more information, we realize there are things we can do better. And just a friendly reminder, we can't go back and change what we've done, but how can we improve and do better as we move forward? So please keep that in mind when you're thinking about agencies you interact with or your own agency in light of some of the items we're going to talk about today. All right, Craig, can we send out question number 1?
Yes, we can. So I'm going to bring up a poll question here, and everyone can interact with this poll question on their screen. And so you'll be able to click on that. So I'm going to share that poll right now, and I'm going to launch that poll, and everyone should see a quick poll come up. And what comes to mind when asked, what is sexual assault kit? What is a sexual assault kit? So you can click on that, and we'll let everybody kind of think about it and give their best answers. And the best answer gets a $100 prize. No, I'm just kidding.
I didn't say that.
Oh. All right, so we got looks about close to 60% have pulled in. I'm gonna let you go a little bit longer here so everybody can, I know some people are probably talking about it and thinking about it. Okay, I am going to close out this poll and I'm going to share those results with everyone. So here we go, close the poll. And I'm going to share those results. Okay. So it looks like our number one answer, Rochelle, is sealed box with contents to complete an exam. Number two answer, with a clinician gives what a clinician gives law enforcement after finishing an exam. And then our third most is sealed envelope with contents to complete an exam. And then the other ones are 2% and 3%. So there they are.
This is absolutely wonderful. So you're going to see why I asked this question as we move forward. So the story behind this sexual assault kit and kit content project. All right. So imagine a room full of experts from different disciplines. This is a group of experts brought together by some government agencies. And in this particular room was a subcommittee of experts that involved clinical experts, forensic clinical experts, law enforcement, detectives. We had advocates, educators. We had representatives from the coroner's medical examiner's offices. I'm sure I'm forgetting some of the other folks. So we have all these diverse disciplines and expertise in the room. And some questions came up that resulted in me bringing a suitcase or two to the next meeting. So the first question that came up was, what is evidence? And making sure we were all on the same page. And so we did some exercises to kind of cross-communicate between the disciplines on what we saw as evidence. And then it came up to, we were having these very in-depth conversations about these sexual assault kits and practices involving these sexual assault kits. And as I'm listening and facilitating conversations, I stopped and said, okay, what is a kit? And realized that what came to mind for everybody in that room was very, very different. Just as on this poll, a sealed box was 46% of the responses. 13% said a sealed envelope. 36% said what the clinician gives law enforcement. So I ended up reaching out to colleagues across the US and asking for kits. Send me unopened, unused kits. And I was overwhelmed by the response of my nursing and law enforcement colleagues. And so at this next meeting, I ended up bringing 2 suitcases with different types of kits. And when we started that subcommittee meeting, the first thing we did was, let's take a look at these kits. And that was when, that you don't know what you don't know really rings true, and you don't realize how focused you are on what happens in your community. And so when I realized how much of a difference there were across these kits, coupled with how much of a difference there was in what people thought of when we talked about sexual assault kits, that led to a research project. And originally we wanted to look at the container itself, the physical container, the contents in it, and all of the documentation and paperwork. And as we started piloting some of our data collection tools, we realized this was bigger than we ever imagined. So the paperwork and forms and documents got pulled out of this first phase of the project, and we just looked at the physical container and the items inside.
No, I called and it's on my phone.
And one of the other aspects of that was, now that we've done this, what are these implications and how do we start these discussions among the appropriate communities? What are the clinical practice implications? What are the implications for patient care, evidence management, investigative and judicial processes, policy, more research? And today we're focusing on what are some of these implications for evidence management. Now, as you can imagine, there are numerous conversations to be held within any of these bullet points I put up here. And there's more than these, but these are some primary examples of where we've been focusing since we've done this project. So here's another example of what happens when I ask, what is a sexual assault kit? I get the name of what different communities and jurisdictions refer to their kits. Anywhere from a SAK or sexual assault kit to a sexual assault evidence collection kit, or a SANE sexual assault evidence collection kit, or there's just no name. It's they grab a brown bag or an envelope and they collect supplies, and what's collected goes in that. So we don't even have a consensus or an agreement on what we call it, much less what it looks like. So when we were looking at data collection, we looked at 42 different kits. So obviously we did not have kits from every jurisdiction or every community in the United States. This was a first run at this project, and we're actually wanting to do a second one to include more kits. We also had a lot of agencies who sent us additional kits. They sent us toxicology kits. They sent us what they called suspect kits and buccal collection kits. So we had different kits, but kits that were used with patients who were identified as victims. I got muted. I just muted myself. Okay, so we looked at 42 different kits. And we looked at 104 different items about each kit. So when you think about the kit that you're familiar with, can you imagine that there are 140 different variations to that kit of things we could look at? So just the container itself, we looked at 32 items. And when we were looking at kit contents, we looked at another 68 items. And then we had some open-ended questions so that they could add additional observations. And so there we go. I'm getting some delays on my end on how this is coming out to you guys. So the kit container itself, these are just examples of some of the items we looked at. The container type, the integrity seal, how was that container itself sealed before it's open for use? What were the dimensions? Who was the manufacturer? Some didn't have a manufacturer. Tracking information. Was there an expiration date on the container? Was there a lot number? Was there chain of custody? Was there a content checklist of what was collected afterwards? Was there a number of items collected in addition to the kit? So we know when there's a medical forensic exam that there's items collected beyond what goes inside that kit container, whether that's clothing or other items. And was there a biohazard warning? So these were just some examples, and all of these had different implications, not only in their variations, but whether they were included or not included on that container. So we also looked at the kit contents. And so again, these are just some examples of what we looked at. Was there, when you opened that kit, was there an inventory in there telling you what should be there? Were there revision dates on any of the contents, whether that was information printed on envelopes or forms or documents? Were there expiration dates on any of the items inside the kit? What about the documents forms? What kind were there? How many were there? Were there patient handouts? Were there tamper-resistant labels for resealing the kit after collection? Were there scales or rulers? We then looked at the actual supplies to facilitate the exam, and we had 25 plus just specific items we were looking to see if they were included. And then we had the opportunity to add other items that maybe weren't on that original list, but appeared in different kits. And then we looked at items that were named or designated for specific sample collections, like buccal swab, debris, saliva, blood sample, different things like that. And we had over 20 plus items in that category, and again, had an other free text for the person examining this kit to add additional items that were unique to that kit. Now, I'm not going to get into all of the different the stats. I'm not going to get into what all we found, because as we go through this, you're going to see that the variations were tremendous. And that's what we're trying to disseminate in our publications, is just going through these different areas and teasing out what these differences and similarities were, and what are some of the potential implications, because we don't have the research to tell us what are the implications on having all these variations among the kits. So this is what led us to evidence management. Is this helping or hindering our evidence management processes? Now, I know I have some clinicians on this webinar, and in the clinical world, we talk about collecting samples. Those samples may be used for healthcare reasons, laboratory analysis, forensic analysis. But for the purpose of this webinar, I'm referring to all these items we collect that are passed on to law enforcement or held for potentially passing on to law enforcement as evidence. So I want to sit with this picture for a moment. So when you go back to 46% of people on the webinar right now said they thought about a box. Well, when you think about a sealed box, then we have to start talking about the dimensions of that box. If you look at the one on the left in this picture and then compare that to the one on the right. And for those that were saying a sealed envelope, again, we're looking at different sizes, different thicknesses. And so I just wanted to provide this visual. I know there's not dimensions on here, but to provide this visual of the differences in sizes and shapes of the kit container across different agencies, different jurisdictions, different communities. I mean, just looking at this, can you start thinking about how what's on the outside of the container, the shape of the container, and what's in it may affect evidence management. I mean, from the point of collecting samples to the point of disposition of those samples or the kit container itself. So a couple of more views for you to consider. Looking at two of the boxes. So when respondents said on the webinar just now that you thought of a sealed box, when you tell me that, because of what I've done with this research, it still doesn't tell me a lot of information other than there's going to be a box. It doesn't tell me the size, the dimensions, or what's on that container. And here's another example. And just, looking at these, think about the point of collection. How many items are in here when it's opened up by the clinician when they're ready to do an exam? And how many items are going to fit back in here, and how are they going to fit? Okay, Craig, can we go on to question number 2?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to pull up that question. It will be the same as before. You can interact with it on your screen. And so here we go. I'm going to launch that poll, and everyone can interact with this. So who is the decision maker regarding the kit container? And it's based on size, shape, material. So let's see what kind of responses we get. People are responding quickly, about going on 40%. Over 50 now. Let it go a little longer for everyone to be able to get their responses in. Okay, and so you can, and some people are chatting it to me. They had some different answers, but maybe we can take a look at those later. Okay, I'm going to close out that poll now. We've got, it looks like the majority of people here that have responded. So I'm going to close that poll and share those results.
All right, wonderful.
Okay, so it looks like a 40% forensic laboratory and 26% have no idea, and a 21% forensic clinicians. And then law enforcement agency is down towards the bottom along with OAG.
Oh, all right. So I know this was not a comprehensive list. We do have some limits on the options that we can provide in these quick polls during the webinar. I realize that there are some areas that I've consulted with where they brought multidisciplinary groups together, created advisory groups, had input from patients, had input from advocacy organizations. So I realized this was not comprehensive, but I selected these because these are the most common that come up when I'm either presenting or teaching or consulting or involved with some advisory board or advisory group or committee. I think it speaks a lot for people to say, yeah, I have no idea. We have a kit, we use it, we may like it, we may not like it, we may love parts of it, there were parts of it that we wish were better, but we have no idea. And so if we don't have an idea of who makes the decisions, how do we create change to improve it? So you're going to see why I asked this question as we move forward as well. In just a second, I get a little bit of a lag after we do the poll. There we go. So I'm going to start this with, we don't know what we don't know. So when you consider the kit container and the contents, how does that affect collection practices, the packaging, the labeling, the sealing, the transferring that kit to other agencies or repackaging of the kit? So for example, when we go back and we look at that smaller box, does it have everything in it that the clinician needs? Does a larger box have everything in it? Are there other items that every healthcare facility is expected to have in stock to supplement the collection process? What about packaging those items or items that don't fit in the kit? And transferring, how many items are we transferring? How are we tracking it? Does it have to be repackaged? Is law enforcement picking it up from the clinical facilities or the clinicians and then having to repackage, relabel, and do all of that to fit their needs for impounding with property and evidence? So we could spend an entire presentation on how the kit container, the kit contents, or both affect any one of these items that you currently see on the screen. So let's keep going with this we don't know what we don't know aspect. So what about considerations regarding the kit container and the contents with temporary storage, short-term storage, long-term storage, permanent storage, different pathways into storage, retrieving these items? So just to kind of show like temporary, some of these storage processes, consider a healthcare agency who provides forensic medical exams, and they do these exams, they collect the items that go in the kit, they collect additional items. They may need to temporarily store those items before they're transferred to law enforcement. So that kit container and for the other items outside of the kit, what is their storage capacity, or where could they store them? And I'm going to call us all out here, because whether we're law enforcement, clinicians, coroners, different folks that we have on this call, we know that across the country, there are items that are stored in desks, items that are stored in cabinets, items that have higher levels of security, where there's security to get into the room, security to get into the building, card access. We know there's so many different aspects of where an item is stored, and then that varies whether it's temporary, short-term, long-term, or permanent. So imagine that picture I had with all those different sized kits. And let's say that all of the coding for that kit is on the end, because that's how it's stored and retrieved at property and evidence. But no one else along the process, whether that's the clinical setting, the laboratory, or other agencies, have the means to store it the same way. And so there are these hindrances that can come when we're looking at that one space of storage. And the reason I put different pathways into storage is that in some areas, the kit may go one way and everything outside the kit goes a different direction. So the kit may get transferred directly to the lab or directly to a specific storage area just for kits. But all those items that aren't in the kit are stored at a different location or a different area within property and evidence. And then retrieval. How are we retrieving them? How easy are they to find? And that links directly to storage and that kit container and what's on the outside of the container. All right, so again, we could spend an entire presentation on all or any of these items and the effects of the kit container and the contents, but we're not going to stop there. It also affects tracking, chain of custody, inventory processes, auditing, purging, items not in the kit. So let's pull all that together. And you're going to see my little context there of how long we could spend just on these items. But pulling it all together, this is just an example of some of the aspects of evidence management from collection to disposition that the kit container and the kit contents can affect. And then I add another layer of that it can affect it depending on the agency who's currently handling the kit. So this is where I told you, I know it's going to be a 30,000-foot view, but it's very important to have that 30,000-foot view, so then you can start coming into more detailed aspects within your own area, jurisdiction, agency, community. Okay, so who does the kit container and contents affect? Well, here we have the forensic healthcare clinician raising their hand. You know, don't forget about me, because what you put on the outside of that container and inside that container can affect me meeting my standard of practice. It can affect me meeting evidence-based, research-informed, recommended practices or guidelines. It may affect my ability to provide equitable care, or the community's ability, the community of clinicians, to provide equitable care across different agencies. There's conflict with the language and the role. I'm a clinician and I'm providing this forensic healthcare service to a patient, but I'm using tools that say affix police seals, who are they impounded by, language that is specific to another profession. And then what about internal evidence management processes within the healthcare setting? Okay, well, law enforcement was raising their hand and saying, don't forget about me, because it affects the same thing for law enforcement. We have standards of practice. We have evidence-based research informed recommended practices and guidelines on how items are stored. How do we preserve the integrity of an item? How do we prevent biodegradation? And we have our evidence management processes. And are we having to repackage, rebag, rebox, relabel, all of these different aspects once it's in the hands of law enforcement? Forensic lab, don't forget me. And we have the same thing. We have standards, we have accreditation standards, we have evidence-based, research-informed, recommended practice, evidence management processes. What's in that kit container, the types of swabs you're using affect my analysis. I need input on that. So I'm putting on these different hats and giving some examples at a higher level of how it's affecting these different agencies. However, we could keep going because there's other agencies and professions that are affected. And of course, there are the patients. There are the patients, the victims, the populations that these kits are being used during the exams. And so it's more than those three examples, but I highlighted those to show that this one container and its contents can have specific effects across disciplines and across the entire evidence management process. So let's look at an example. We're going to call the first example the small box conundrum. So I'm going to bring back that picture in the background where we're looking at the different sizes. And I have to preface the two examples I'm going to present here as this is not a case study of one specific location, but this is more of a combination of different things I've ran into during the last 20 years, but more specifically during the last 5 to 7 years regarding kit containers and kit contents. So imagine a community or a jurisdiction where there is a goal of we need more efficient storage. That's the primary focus for looking at what type of container we want. Storage and then the cost of the kit, because we're buying these kits and providing them to everyone that needs them. So are they going in racks? Are they going in drawers? Are they going in buckets? What are they going in? So they're looking at these different aspects. And the decision by this government agency was we want a small box. Smaller, better. Here are the dimensions that fit best into our storage and are, in our opinion, the most cost efficient to order and disseminate throughout our jurisdiction. So the challenge here is that when one agency is making these decisions in a silo, they may not be aware of the unintended effects across the continuum of evidence management from collection to disposition, effects that are practice related for these other agencies or the professionals in these other agencies. So who did this decision affect? Well, it affected the forensic clinicians. The kit did not contain everything they needed to complete the exam. So they had to do workarounds. They had to start ordering additional supplies. They needed items that they normally would not have in stock as a clinical agency. Items collected did not fit back in the container. So it's nice when the small box comes and all the envelopes and all the swab boxes and everything are flat. But once the boxes are put together, once the items are added, then they didn't necessarily fit nice and snug back into this box. So additional containers were needed, or very creative sealing of that container might occur. And it did not meet or was inconsistent with forensic healthcare standards of care. And so one community actually said, this doesn't work. As forensic nurses, we're not able to meet our standard of care for these patients. And so they received funding and ordered their own kits. And so I'm guessing there are a lot of you out there just shaking your head going, oh no, you know, what did that create? And so you can just imagine that when now you have multiple agencies saying, I need to do this different. It affected law enforcement. So there, in some cases, may have been incomplete collection of items during the exam with a recommendation to law enforcement, these items need to be collected, but we're not able to with our current. There may have been complete collection of all the items and samples, but additional or different packaging had to be used. And now we have new evidence management challenges. The goal was efficient storage, but now we're storing multiple items or different types of containers and packaging. The box has got creative sealing because it doesn't close completely. So there's a lot of unintended consequences that occurred. But other considerations on just this one example, I would say, do we have another hour just to talk about that? Which we don't, but patient care. It affects patient care. It affects the investigative and judicial processes. There's a financial component to it. The clinics are ordering supplies they originally didn't have budgeted. Now the storage capacity was supposed to be more efficient, but now we have all these different packages and it's not fitting into our system like we expected. Do we have recommended practices and published guidelines, which I know everyone on the webinar knows that we are missing some of these recommended practices and published guidelines. For example, what should be standard in a kit? What are the minimum items that should be standard on the kit container or within the kit? How does, that affects policy, but then we also have these multiple packages involving, and I say multiple packages to a case. I know that always occurs because law enforcement and other folks are collecting from different crime scenes. But what I'm talking here is linking multiple packages that were collected by the forensic clinician just at the point of collection. So that's a snapshot across what can happen when we go one direction. So let's go the other direction. Let's do the large box. Let's say that we have a different agency who says, well, we have multiple goals. We have multiple people at the table. We want everything in the kit, and we want the same kit used across our entire geographic region, whether that's a county, a state, whatever it may be. And we have a goal of equitable care. We want all patients to receive the same level, the same type of care, regardless of where they go to receive that care. We want a standard container size to optimize storage. And that storage optimization was very much geared towards the forensic lab in this case that I'm thinking about. But we also want to meet practice standards. However, the practice standards that were being met were for the lab. And there was an assumption that that would also improve evidence management for all. But what we're finding is that doesn't necessarily hold true. So what do you think? Imagine you originally, if you look at the picture and count, go to the smallest envelope on the right and say that that's what you're used to handling. That's what clinicians are used to seeing. And then you switch to the large box on the left. So what do you think for experienced and less experienced clinicians, potentially overwhelmed by the number of items in the kit? Do they have the space to lay out all those items and prepare for the exam or prepare for packaging after the exam? What does the goal of same care mean? Does that mean all the items are collected for every patient? And if so, what type of throughput burden on analysis does that create? And what type of burden on evidence does that create and investigation? And if it's based on history and clinician assessment, how many items out of that larger box are routinely not used or discarded? Now, I realize an argument here is, well, you can use those for future exams. But if they're routinely not used, then you end up with a stockpile of items that eventually are thrown away. And you have a stockpile of items that could be used at a later exam, but are they being kept to prevent contamination and cross-contamination or secondary transfer? So do forensic lab policies require analysis of all the items collected? So does it increase the number of items collected that may or may not need to be collected? And if so, is there a policy within the lab that all items collected have to be analyzed? Does the items in the kit for sample collection and packaging promote efficient lab processes, or does it hinder it? Does it promote efficient collection processes, or does it hinder it? Does the kit container promote efficient storage processes, or does it hinder that? So are all the agencies equipped with adequate storage space? So an example that comes to mind for an agency, for a healthcare agency organization, large organization actually, that was using that smaller envelope, they had a filing system. They had some locking cabinets and they had a filing system. And guess what? The box did not fit in the filing system and did not allow for the temporary storage of as many kits as they previously were able to do, not including the items that didn't fit in the kit that they were already storing, like the clothing. So the take home here on both of these examples is that there's unintended effects across the continuum of evidence management from collection to disposition when you're looking at the kit container design and when you're looking at the contents of the kit container. So considerations moving forward. Decision-making processes. Who's at the table making this decision? Well, we have a poll here that 40% say the forensic lab is making the decisions, 26% has no idea. And I'm sure there's a handful that are saying, well, we have multiple disciplines that are at the table. But we also have 21% saying the forensic clinicians are making this decision. Now, keep in mind that there are some jurisdictions that do not have a standardized kit. So those examples I showed you do not exist. They pull supply from stock to complete the exam, and items collected are appropriately packaged and sealed and labeled and then placed into a larger container that may be a brown bag, it may be an envelope, but there's not a standard with all of these things we were looking at when we were doing the project, because they've decided to be most efficient. It's guided by what is needed at the time of exam, appropriately packaged and sealed, and then transferred to law enforcement. Now, what I have found in some of these situations is that law enforcement is then placing it into a different container in order to impound it and label it properly for their systems. But who's not at the table when making the decision processes that needs to be at the table? And are we exploring the unintended consequences and the stakeholder input? If the lab prefers a certain length or type of swab to be used for collection, whether that's because the length fits better with their analysis systems, whether it's the type of material used on the end of the swab is better for collection or release during analysis. If the clinicians don't know that and they're using general stock because the ones in the kit, the sticks keep breaking, then we're having unintended consequences that aren't realized because we're not having communication between these different disciplines. So cross-disciplinary education define a shared understanding of priorities. What are the needs of the different professionals who handle evidence and are responsible for some aspect of evidence management processes? I feel safe to say that some folks didn't think about their responsibility with evidence management, but if you're handling an item of evidence at any point in the process, then you contribute to the evidence management process. And is container selection creating evidence management burdens across any of the agencies? Whether it's creating conflict because it contradicts or is inconsistent with that profession's best practices or recommended practices? Or does it create storage issues? Does it create tracking and retrieval issues? So are there inconsistencies or contraindications across disciplines, like I just said, regarding sexual assault evidence management? Where is sexual assault evidence stored at each agency? Are we coming together at a table saying, okay, here is how I store it. How can we work together for me to improve my storage or to improve this container so it works better for all of the agencies? What are the recommended guidelines for all types of sexual assault evidence? We don't have them for all types, but we do have it for a lot of the different types. And where are the guidelines lacking? So that was a lot very, very quickly. But my goal was to give about 15 minutes for some questions and answers. And so Craig, I'm going to kind of turn it over to the team to see what we want to address for questions.
Yeah, and if you do have questions or something specific to your agency or something you've seen related here, please submit it in the questions box there. And we do have a few questions now, and so I'm just going to go through these in order. I haven't pre-read these, so we'll see what we got here. So we've got a question from Jonathan. He says, I'm sure this is going to be considered during the presentation, but are you experiencing a huge variety of results when it comes to disposition allowances?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if, so I guess what I think, I hear IAPE in the back of my head going, are they doing disposition? And are they doing disposition in a standardized manner and a timely manner and things like that? But I would say that's also profession dependent, because if I walk into a room full of forensic nurses and say, what's the disposition of all the items that you may have at any point in time? Are you keeping non-investigative kits for patients who wanted collection but have elected not to report? How long do you keep them? What's the disposition process? And I realize disposition also holds other connotations as far as where it's at in the investigative and judicial processes. So again, yes, absolutely variations across those as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, they're pouring in now, so hold on, here they come.
That's why
So,
I'm not looking at them.
So yeah, so this is good, everyone. We're going to do our best to answer these. It says, there's a question about regarding storage kits and room temperature, refrigeration, freezing. I don't know if you can hit on that or not.
Absolutely.
I know it's different.
Well,
Okay.
so this comes back to a few different considerations that I can touch on quickly. One is there was recommended practices that came out from NIST and NIJ, I believe in 2013, about storing of biological evidence. And there was also other recommendations that have came out. And so in one aspect, you're going to see recommendations that if biological evidence has potential to degrade if not refrigerated, then we need to refrigerate it. That also means we have some jurisdictions that are refrigerating all kits. However, you're going to see other recommendations that say do not refrigerate the kits. It actually increases growth and degradation of other items in the kit. So one of my challenges here is I don't know what's in your kit, but I have, during this research project, I did encounter kits that on the outside of the kit said do not refrigerate, and kits that said refrigerate immediately. Now, what's interesting is when you look at the contents, is there actually anything in there that's going to degrade? And if it's not refrigerated. And the other challenge is, are we putting things in the kit that need a different pathway for analysis, such as tubes of blood? Because some jurisdictions, toxicology was at one point toxicology samples were being included in that larger kit container. There should not be anything wet in that larger kit container for dry storage. And so that again comes back to, you have the forensic nurses or forensic clinicians who are collecting these items based on their standards of practice and the patient history and what they're observing during their assessment. But our kit containers and evidence management process beyond the clinical setting may not accommodate all these different aspects of what's collecting if we're not communicating. So yes, to answer your question, there was a huge variation about refrigeration, not refrigeration, just as there was a huge variation of what's in it. Some jurisdictions, you do not include undergarments, underpants in the kit. Other jurisdictions required them to go with the kit, but no other clothing to go with the kit because it's a different pathway to analysis. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that was great information. Thank you. Is there, I think you may have said this, is there a direct resource we could steer people to? Maybe we could provide that in the email follow-up where people could do a little more research on their own as far as refrigeration.
We can provide some links to the information. And the one thing I would highlight for everybody here is when you're looking at that information, consider what your kit container is and what's inside it.
Okay, super. All right, so we got another one from Maria. She says, how can we dispose of kits once cases are closed or once analysis has been completed?
Okay, that's a tricky one to answer because every state
Okay.
legal jurisdiction and retention policies
Yes.
are different, and retention policies within agencies can vary. So this is another difference that, we don't know what we don't know, right? We know what's required in our area, or we may have some confusion about what's required in our jurisdiction. But in some states, there's a requirement to retain kits for 5 years. Some states require retaining for 20 years. Some states require retaining indefinitely. So I can't answer that specifically for where you're at, but what I could say is a conversation needs to be held between the different stakeholders that are involved with that disposition process. Just because it's been adjudicated doesn't mean that you don't have other regulations or statutes that direct the retention policy and assess for disposition. So this really comes back to having those internal policies and operating procedures that meet your regulatory guidelines for retention and adjudication and disposition.
Okay, and we're getting some responses. I mean, some people are saying that like in the state of Tennessee, it's forever. Someone said 99
Right.
years. I don't know what state that's for. So it's really going to vary. And I think we do have another question from Gloria. She said the same thing, how long to retain an evidence kit. And it's really going to require some research on your end to find out what your state policies are.
And then I would challenge you to think beyond the kit. That was part of the title here, is because there is evidence being collected that doesn't fit inside that container. If that container was larger, it would be in that container. So does that fall under the guidelines for retention of the evidence kit? So those are some of the challenges we don't necessarily think about, because if law enforcement is receiving the kit, this is what we're looking at. But if there's not the knowledge that there's other items that were collected as part of the kit but didn't fit into the kit, then that creates that other question of, well, how do we manage that as well?
Okay.
Excellent question.
And there's a lot of yeah, they're great questions, everyone. And I know some people are asking some of the same questions in different ways. Like we have another question. It says, necessary to store a SANE kit in the fridge. Since I started evidence in 2016, we have not refrigerated them. But we do have lots that are in our fridge from years ago. So again, I think this goes back to your previous answers, correct, Rochelle?
That does go back to my previous answer, but also highlights a new implication for that agency, in that you have them stored. So was there changes in the kit container and contents, or what was put inside the kit upon collection between when those were stored and what the practice is today? There's one difference to consider. Another item to consider is who's storing those and how do they need to be maintained? Because once they've been stored, are we going to cause more damage if technically there's nothing in it that requires refrigeration, but now refrigeration has occurred? Is there the chance to increase degradation if it's removed from refrigeration? So there's a lot of aspects to consider about what was done in the past and what that's created and what you may be doing presently.
Okay, yeah, great answer. Thank you. We have another one here. Is there anything stating that we need to submit unsubmitted old sexual assault kits from like 2008, 2010 era?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you say it again, Craig?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, they're just wondering if they should submit sexual assault kits that have been unsubmitted from the 2008, 2010. So I don't think they've been submitted. I'm assuming it's submitted for testing. I'm assuming.
Okay, so that's beyond my ability to answer.
Okay.
because we're walking into a hotbed of considerations here. So I'm not sidestepping it because it's controversial. I'm just saying that's beyond my scope without more information. I know there's a push for getting everything submitted, and so maybe there are some internal pushbacks or internal barriers that this particular agency or jurisdiction is running into. Without knowing more, I can't really speak to that one in a public forum.
Okay.
Craig, this is Joe.
Yes, sir. Go, Joe.
Someplace that everybody can go and get some pretty good information. There's been a move for the last 10 years because of the backlog of rape kits, And we started with legislation of inventorying them in all of our departments, state legislation, and then notifying victims. And as you watch all of these different legislated processes, the things that we have to do, it's called inthebacklog.com, I believe. Just run In the Backlog, and it's a nonprofit corporation who monitors all the laws across the country. And if you can click on a map, it will take you to the map. It'll tell you what legislation has occurred in the last several years that may impact. It's just a good thumbnail of what's going on in your state, and then you may be able to drill down more into your statutes. But I can tell you over the last 5, 6, 7 years, nobody was doing any of these things. Now in some states, we have to test everything when it comes in. Some states you have to do the old things. It's different in every state, but In the Backlog is a great resource.
So I want to add 2 things to what Joe just shared. So out of respect for all my forensic lab folks there, I think it's worth calling out that there is a difference between a backlog and unsubmitted kits. And so even though we're seeing the backlog and a lot of the language and the lay conversations, that internally and within our multidisciplinary teams, we are very much aware that there's a difference between a backlog, so things that have been submitted and have not yet been analyzed, versus all the items that have not been submitted, so the unsubmitted kits. And the other aspect that this brings up, Joe just mentioned that some states are mandating analysis of all kits. I will take that a step farther and share some states are not only mandating analysis of all kits, they're mandating the timeline for analysis of those kits. And so that was some of the impetus for reducing the number of items in the container. You know, they're looking at throughput and hours and time and cost. There's a lot of aspects that are being considered. And the other piece of that is, what was I going to say on that? With these mandates brings up questions for patients have a right for a forensic medical exam. They have a right to have a kit collected, regardless if they are reporting to law enforcement at that point. And so that evidence management considerations for these kits, there are considerations there, because if it's a jurisdiction that police impounds that kit, even though it's not been reported, how does that work in their evidence management systems? And if it's a state where it mandates analysis, yet the patient has not yet elected to report to law enforcement, we have a lot of unintended consequences and considerations that have to occur with these types of kits, and who's storing them and managing them. And then the disposition of them is a whole nother area of question.
Okay, great. Thank you. This is good. And you guys, there's so many questions coming in, and some of them are responses to answers. So I appreciate those. I got many more. We'll just keep going here. So we've got a bunch. I'm trying to figure out what's going to be the next one. How about this one? Is it possible for the state lab to set the standard?
Is it possible for the state lab, I'm assuming the standard for the kit container and the kit contents?
Yes.
There are
I believe
jurisdictions
so.
where the state lab does set the standard and makes
Okay.
those decisions. However, the caveat to that is, what are the consequences for the other agencies? And is there anything about that kit container, if it's done without consultation or conversation, including these other stakeholders, there are a lot of aspects and burdens that are being created that can actually impact the care of the patient. And so, I mean, yes, there are places that the lab does decide it, and how well that works, I think, depends on who all is involved in those decision-making processes. So Craig,
Okay.
I know we're starting
Good.
to run out of time. I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions.
Yeah, we'll go a little bit longer here.
Okay.
So I have another question here. It says, if the sexual assault kit has been tested by the lab, what is the benefit to retaining that kit after the trial?
Joe, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think if you get rid of it before the trial and the defense attorney wants to see it in court and it's not there, he's going to challenge the case right off the bat. You just don't want to get rid of it. First of all, some states are going to tell you how long you have to keep it, and some states are just moot on it. But you don't want to get rid of it, especially before that case is over with. You don't want any defense challenges.
And some of the actual, I think you were also saying after the trial, is that the retention also protects the appeals process and things like that. But also, as we have advances in forensic analysis technology, we are finding that things can be detected that otherwise weren't able to detect 20 years ago.
Right.
Smaller sample sizes are required, things like that. So I think there's a lot, I know there's a lot of frustration because I've heard it at several meetings about the retention, the forever concept of retention, and the burdens that can create just tracking, auditing, inventory, storage, and all of that. But I think, you know, the literature, I don't think it's all in one place. You kind of have to really dig through it to see why are we doing that. And some of what you'll see out there is trial is done, but the judicial process may not necessarily be over. There may be changes and advances in technology. If there's an appeal, there's a lot of factors that come into play there with the different agents, different groups promoting that.
Craig,
Okay.
let me add one other thing when it comes to the testing. You know, if you sent something to the crime lab 20 years ago and they had no, and it's still in your property and they tested it and they came back with negative results, because the science has changed, you're finding a lot of departments are sending them back to the lab 20 years later and coming up with hits on it. So as Rochelle was saying, is as the science changes, also the likelihood of solving that case increases greatly. So that's something to always be aware of.
Okay. Yeah, we have another interesting question.
Craig, before you go to the next question, I want to return to the question again about the forensic lab making the decision about the kit. One specific example that I've run into at least 4 or 5 times now is where that has occurred, but then what happens, or it was either forensic lab or forensic lab in conjunction with law enforcement, and what has happened is that included how they labeled the envelopes inside the kit and what they identified as being standard collection in the kit, and that was in conflict with what the clinicians were collecting based on the evidence for their practice. And so one example I would give is the envelope, swab box, instructions, whatever that piece is, says rectal swabs. However, they were using that same kit in children where they were not collecting rectal swabs. They're collecting anal and perianal swabs. And that's a very different anatomical structure for the nurse. And for a nurse to say, yes, it's rectal, but then testify, well, it's perianal and anal, then you're creating inconsistencies for that nurse, having to try to defend that language based on, yes, they do know what the anatomical structures are, they do know why they're collecting, yet the kit limits them to select these specific items. As research advances in saying that collecting on female patients, collecting from the genitalia in certain areas and concentrating the swabs has a greater yield with certain STR analysis, that may direct clinical practice, but how it's presented in the kit may not promote that clinical practice. So I hope that makes a little more sense on some of the other nuances that can happen that are completely well meant but unintended consequences. Craig, do we have another question that we want to do before we wrap it up?
Yes, we do. So Joe, another question that I have was people were asking about the website you had mentioned.
In the backlog. Let me bring it up here on my screen here, and I'll give you the exact. It may be org. Just 1 second here.
Okay. And while you're doing that, I'll ask one more question here. It says, what about the retention of items such as blankets and pillows that won't actually fit into the kits themselves?
That comes back to the question we were saying earlier, based on your jurisdiction, whether it's agency retention policies, whether it's legislated retention policies, what's the intent of that policy versus what are the words in that policy? If it's an item that is collected at the time of the exam but can't be put in the kit, let's say there is a blanket that a child is swaddled in, that skin-to-skin contact that is definitely going to be collected by the forensic clinician. and it's not going to fit in the kit. But does it follow a different retention policy because it didn't fit in the box? You know, does it follow a different retention policy than the debris that was collected that is in the box? Or the box, I should say the container, sorry, that's in the container. So those are some of the challenges that I'm trying to highlight that we may not have thought of when we're designing the kit containers and contents, and also how we're designing our evidence management policies and the language we're using.
Okay. That's good. And I'm going through the questions here. A lot of them are responses to questions, and I got the website, Joe, if you were able to find it, and I did send it to everyone, but it's end, as in end, E-N-D, thebacklog.org. So all one word, end, thebacklog.org. I did send that as a message to everyone too on here. And I think from here we're getting close to being way over time actually. And I know there's a few things that we want to wrap up with, and there's going to be an opportunity as soon as this webinar closes out for you to submit additional questions that you might have if it wasn't covered here or if it was not clear. And so take the moment to do that. And Joe, I know you have a few things that you would like to share with everyone that's here also.
Right. Can you see my screen?
I'm actually showing from my end, Joe. Are you able to see my screen?
No.
Or is it not showing?
I'm not getting
interesting.
I'm not getting your prompt.
Okay. I will make you presenter here, Joe. Try that again. Okay, are you getting it now?
No.
Check again.
I am now.
Okay.
You got anything on there?
I have a
Craig?
delay on my end, so anybody else out there can let me know because it doesn't show for me immediately.
It's up.
Okay. Just real briefly, folks, just for about less than a minute. We're starting to post live classes through this year. Last year was kind of difficult because of COVID. And we've got Washington coming up, Arizona next week, Oregon, going to be in May, going to be in Colorado, Louisiana, Burbank. We've got for those of you that are new to our website, we're starting to put on classes for the clerk of the courts. They have evidence rooms and they have the good stuff. And so they have not had any training in the past. And so we're going to try to help how do we manage evidence in the property rooms at the courts. We'll be in Topeka, in Indiana, in Hearst, Texas again. And let me go to the next page here. Virginia Beach, Virginia, Minneapolis. We're gonna have another clerk's court in North Carolina, probably in the hills on the east side of the state. North Carolina, Utah, and up in northern Ohio. Those are going to be, we're looking right now to finalize those real quick. And one of those things, if you can't travel, we understand that. We have our online class. It's just like watching a Netflix. You can watch it at your convenience, watch it for 30 minutes, come back and watch some more the next day. It's almost identical to our regular class. And we are providing at all of our classes now. We authored a 400-page property by the book a number of years ago. We are giving that electronically both to our live classes and to our video classes. So if that's of any interest, we found a lot of interest in our video class, but people do like to travel. They like to be in live classes. If you think you can come to a class, get registered up early because we're finding restrictions. And it may have 40 seats in the class, but our hosts are saying we can only have 25 sitting in the class. So just keep that in mind when these things start. Historically, our classes have been 50, 60, 70 people. And so we may have the room size, but our host may not allow that many people in the class. For those of you who are on our mailing list, you got a survey the other day. Best practices dealing with drugs. We're going to put the results of that in our next evidence log. So if you haven't participated on that link, we'd really appreciate it. We've had probably about 500 or 600 departments respond to it. But when we put the data in our next magazine, we'd like to have as many participate as possible. And last thing I've got to say, if you haven't paid your dues yet, we'd really appreciate it, so we can keep on continuing giving you all the services that we provide. And Craig, that is it. And Rochelle, thank you so very much for the information. I think it's very valuable for all of us.
Thank you for the
Okay.
opportunity. Like I said, I know it's going to create more questions and answers right now, but it's the start of a conversation, right?
Yep.
Yes, I think it's good. And so as I had shared at the end of the webinar here, when it's closed out, you'll be prompted with a very, very short survey. Just give your feedback, submit your questions through there, and maybe we can continue this discussion with another topic down the road, Rochelle, and we'll see what the feedback is and see if there's a desire for that. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar in about a month. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.